Howdy y'all, I'm Kat, and today we're going to be talking about stitch drift when working in the round in crochet. Now stitch drift happens because when we're working in the round, we're constantly working in the same direction, which pulls our tension in that same direction, which then causes our stitches to lean. Now stitch drift isn't too terribly important unless you're trying to do color work where you want your lines to be straight. If you're doing specialty stitches that you want to be straight up and down because they can have a tendency to lean, or if you're doing shaping because each round is going to offset your center point ever so slightly. However, there are ways for us to control the stitch drift that I'm going to show you right now. The first method you're probably familiar with, especially if you do amigurumi style crochet, and that's going to be an X stitch with your single crochets. In order to do this, you'll start a single crochet like normal, but instead of yarning over your hook, you're going to put your yarn underneath your hook and pull through. Then for the second pull through again, instead of putting your yarn over your hook, you're going to put your yarn under your hook and pull through. Then you'll just continue on with that same pattern. Yarn under and pull through, yarn under and pull through. That second pull through can be a little bit difficult, but if you just angle your hook so that it's facing up and down, it's a lot easier to swoop right in there. When reaching the end of the round, you would just continue on as normal, doing this X style stitch. Because the X style single crochet stitch is shorter and tighter, though it still produces a lean, the lean isn't as noticeable as it is when using a Y style stitch. Editor Kat's here. Just to be clear, the Y style stitch is that standard single crochet with a yarn over pull through and another yarn over pull through. In fact, the X style stitch is so ubiquitous when working in the round, and especially in amigurumi, that we're going to continue to use it when showing you the rest of these methods. Now, our next way to control the lean in a much more significant way is going to be by working in joined rounds instead of continuous rounds. Joined rounds are something that I use a lot, and that's because they break up the tension caused by working continuously in the round by breaking up each round. When reaching the end of the joined round, I locate the first stitch of the round and I slip stitch into it. Then to start the next round, I chain up to the height of the needed stitch. Then I put my first stitch of the round in that same stitch that I joined into. This makes sure that my stitch is at the correct height for the new round and that I don't lose any stitches. Working in joined rounds significantly reduces the tension when compared to working in continuous rounds. However, some people do not like to work in joined rounds because when you turn it over to the back, the seam of the join can be extremely visible if you know what to look for. However, there's another way of joining our rounds that can significantly reduce the visibility of that seam. In order to reduce the visibility of our joining seam, we're going to work our joining stitch from the inside of our work to the outside of the work. In order to do so, once we get to the end of our round, we're going to elongate our working loop, take out our hook, then insert our hook into the first stitch of the round from the inside of our work to the outside. This stitch can be a bit stiff, so you might have to work to get into it. Then you'll take your working loop, hold it around your hook as you pull your hook through that first stitch. Now, once we look at the front, we can see how we can pull that joining stitch so that it pretty much disappears. Now hold on to your work and pull your stitch tight, and you'll continue on as normal, doing a chain so you get to the correct stitch height, then working your first stitch into the stitch that you joined into. You'll then continue on as normal. Although joining our seams on the inside of our work doesn't necessarily reduce our stitch drift any more than joining our seams on the outside of our work, when we turn these both over and compare the visibility of our joining seam, the seam on the outside is way more visible than the seam on the inside. Now there's one final method in controlling our stitch drift where we focus on reducing the tension both in working in the round and in our stitches. In order to reduce the tension in our stitches, all we need to do is work in the back loop only throughout our entire piece. Now I'm still using the X-style stitch, but because I'm working in the back loop, the tension within each stitch itself is lessened, and thus it doesn't pull or lean as far as it normally would. Now when we join these rounds together, we need to do it in a specific way so that we can keep the stitch pattern. Our goal is to go underneath the back loop of the first stitch of our round and through the chain so that we have some added security. Finding that chain stitch can be hard, but if I turn to the back, you can see that here is our first stitch, and this first bump is going to be one of the bumps of the chain. So I'm going to go through this back loop and then into here as well. So what that looks like is going through the back loop of our first stitch. Then I'm going to turn my piece around, identify that loop from the chain, go in there, and slip stitch join that to the previous round. Now, like most of these joins, we're going to chain one to start off our round, and although this stitch has gotten pulled, I'm still only going to be working into that back loop rather, and continue working my piece in back loop single crochets. Working in joined rounds and the back loop only creates almost perfectly aligned stitches. However, there is something to take into consideration. Because we're only working through one loop of the stitch, we create a larger overall piece than working through both loops of the stitch because these stitches are able to grow larger. Another thing is the texture that we get. Because we're only working in the back loop, we end up getting the front loop visible on our piece that shows up as this horizontal ridge throughout. But we can achieve the same alignment by only working in the front loops, which gets rid of that ridge, yet retains the alignment and retains the overall size. When we lie all of these methods side by side, it's a lot easier to see just how big of a difference switching up your stitch pattern and switching up your joining method really has on the alignment of your stitches in general. Now, as always, there's not a best method or a worst method, but there is a method that's going to be best for the project that you're working on. So hopefully this was nice and informative and got you to learn more about why you're having drift, figure out a way to work with it. There is one other thing that I want to mention. When you're working only in the front loops, when you're doing your increases and your decreases, they can tend to get a little holy. There's a different method that you want to use when increasing and decreasing that we will definitely be covering in the future. So stay tuned for that. But otherwise, that's going to be the video for today. I hope you guys learned a lot. A little bit different of a style for me, but I figured this could be short and sweet, I don't know, 5 feet to be exact, just because you already pretty much know all of the methods that we're working on, or all the stitches and styles that we're working on in here. But just kind of need to get the visual reference to see what that lean looks like. So yeah, this flower is for you guys. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. This first